So somebody asked me to do some more Timberwolves content. And if you ask me for something in the comment section, I'm probably going to do my best to show up and do it. So here it is. This is my opinion about the Minnesota Timberwolves. There are three specific things that I want to point out. One, Zach Randolph and Dante DiVincenzo didn't ask to be there. And so the question has to be, do they even want to be there? And that can be a major reason why we see such a drop off in how they've played from New York to Minnesota. The second thing, the Western Conference has gotten much better. Much better. Even the teams that were the worst teams last year got better. Which means if you're not getting significantly better, these other teams can catch you. The last thing is that this team is dealing with so much roster fluctuation that took place late in the offseason that they are then having to recalibrate how they're going to show up from day in and day out, night to night. And it's happening without having the advantage of a full off-season training camp and the ability to actually have the continuity needed to compete at a high level. Essentially, these guys don't really know each other, right? I think Anthony Edwards just said in an interview, said, hey, we're soft. Can't nobody say nothing to nobody. Well, nobody can say nothing to nobody because they don't know you, bro. They don't know you. Y'all haven't spent years together, right? You guys haven't gone and hung out in the off season. You guys are barely putting together a couple team dinners. Like that trade with Karl Anthony Towns to the Knicks for Randolph and DiVincenzo, right, happened late in the offseason. So they're coming in, hitting the ground running straight into a training camp. There was no time for team building, chemistry development, right? These guys haven't been playing together to get that continuity down, knowing where each other likes the ball and how to get it to them, right? How to maximize their skills together. They haven't had that. And so then when you have a little injury and you have a little, guy out of the rotation and struggling to find his shot, and keep in mind, I don't know if you all saw the interview with Dante DiVincenzo on Young Guy and the Three, something like that, right? JJ Redick's old podcast now with Duncan Robinson. You have this dynamic where it's like, okay, you thought you were going to be a Knick and your family settled in. You just had a great playoff run and all of a sudden out of nowhere, boom, now you're traded to Minnesota. Yo, that's a huge shift coming from New York going to Minnesota. And it's happening overnight. You got to go straight to training camp. You got to get straight to, these dudes are not settled. So they're not going to have continuity. Now, I know I'm diving straight into this video, but I do want to get to my promoter for this video. This video is brought to you by Bridges & Stone's Family and Relationship Care. The holidays can be tough for a lot of us, whether it's distance from family, relationship issues, social isolation, or just struggling to adapt to the weather of this season. Depression and loneliness can get to us all. This season doesn't have to be something to dread, though. It can also be an opportunity to learn coping skills and the steps you need to move into healthier relationships. Contact Bridges & Stones today for a free consultation with a professional coach to get the support that you need. Don't struggle alone. The link is in the description box below. Now that I got that out the way, let's really dive into this. Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. These two dudes, for all intents and purposes and all accounts, they absolutely loved being in New York. They loved being there. It was something that they relished. Playing for Tom Thibodeau, playing with those guys, that level of continuity there, and chemistry between Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson and DiVincenzo, and then you got Isaiah Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson. They just found this beautiful kind of chemistry and mix of talents and personalities that just worked. Right? Jalen Brunson is kind of the more quiet leader who leads by example, but he's also a consummate winner and floor general. He's won at every level. I'm sure at some point he's going to win an NBA championship just because he's won at literally every level, from state championships in high school to NCAA championships at Villanova. He's going to probably figure it out in the NBA and win one. And then you get to Minnesota. Minnesota has struggled to win for its entire organizational length. They probably have one of the worst team governors, ownerships in NBA history in Minnesota. Right? They don't know how to put together winning. They don't, that's not even necessarily their primary objective. Right? And then you have a young leader in Anthony Edwards who's talented as hell, but he's young. He's young. And when you're a grown man and you got kids and you're married, it's hard to receive advice from a younger guy who ain't got no kids, ain't married, and you just met. I don't care how talented you are. It's hard to call me out. Who are you? I don't know you. Right? And that's a big dynamic that I think is taking place on this team is Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo are figuring out, do they even want to be there still? Do they need to ask for a trade? Julius Randle's going to be a free agent. He might be looking elsewhere. He might be looking at, hey, I'd rather play for Tyronn Lue with the Clippers. You know what I mean? Like I'd rather go play someplace else than Minnesota. Dante DiVincenzo, he was used to being a starter. Now he's coming off the bench, right? Rob Dillingham has surpassed him in some ways, offensively wise, right? He still got Mike Conley there, right? All of a sudden now you're the third, fourth, maybe fifth guard. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is there, and you are a starting guard for a playoff team, right? So do they want to even be there? That's something that really has to be looked at. And I don't know if they're going to give us a clear answer because, I mean, who professionally is going to be like, nah, I don't want to be here. But this leads to, and this is kind of like a side note, I personally think the NCAA has figured it out. You need to have a portal. You need to have opportunities for players to direct their own destiny and say, hey, this is where I want to go play. This is who I want to play for. You know why? Because you don't fall into these issues about buy-in and about effort. When you've wanted to go there, when you want to be there, and some people worry about, oh, everybody's going to want to go to LA. No, they aren't. Not everybody is built for the main stage, the big stage and the bright lights. Not everybody wants to be there with all the media, right? Some people just want, cool, calm, collected. Hey, I just want to go out there and fish, right? That's what some guys like to do. There are plenty of Nikola Jokic's and Giannis Antetokounmpos who want that low profile life. You just got to allow people to choose you. That's how you enter into a healthy relationship. You don't force them to come to you and force them to fit and then tell them they got to be professional by wanting to be there. In what business? Let's say you're a mechanic, right? And you're in Chicago and all of a sudden a auto body shop somewhere in North Carolina or in Alabama calls up your boss and says, I want to trade for this guy. I heard it's pretty good with the body work. And you're like, what? Nah, bro. Nah, that's not what we're doing, right? I'm not moving like that, but somehow we go, because you make more money, you should want to do that. Hey, I can go to people who make even more money than NBA players, CEOs and executives. They don't get traded, right? So the idea of trading a human being to someplace you don't want to be without your opinion and approval, right, is already an experience that's not going to reap good dividends. All that's to say is I think they need to remove most of these general managers, or at least some of this like trading by the team. They can offer, they can ask, but I think it needs to be the player who goes like, yes, I want to be there. Because if they don't give a hard yes, you're going to end up in these scenarios more often than not where they're not going to give the effort. And why should they? They didn't ask to be there. You're inconveniencing their entire life by uprooting their family, their children from schools. They've got to adjust. Even if they wanted to be there, they probably wouldn't do it at the end of the off season, right? They would have done it early where you can go around and look for a nice neighborhood, a good school, a place you want your kids to be, right? Maybe you got some family in the area, right? You can figure it out, right? You can reposition yourself for the opportunity that is afforded to you. But when you get traded for at the end of the off season, yeah, you might be a little ticked. You might be a little unnerved, especially if you're going to a worse organization that doesn't have the same pedigree of attempting to win championships that you may want to do. You may not like the coach. You may not like the team dynamic and the style of play. You don't think it suits you, right? All these things go into it. Let these players choose, because then you're going to have buy-in. And you know who knows who they want to play with most? The player. The player knows if they want to play with this guy or not, right? There's guys who are like, I would love to play with this guy. And there's also guys they were like, I would hate to play with this guy. Why is Anthony Davis and LeBron James played so well together? Because they wanted to play together. Why was LeBron James and D Wade able to figure it out? Because they wanted to play together. Chris Bosh, all those guys had to assume different types of roles. But because they wanted to be there, they were bought in. That's what needs to happen in the NBA. I might do a video on that to the side later on. Either way, I digress. Back to the Minnesota Timberwolves. The rest of the Western Conference got significantly better. Even if you look at like a Portland Trailblazers, the Portland Trailblazers got better. Scoot Henderson is more experienced. Shaden Sharp is back from injury. Jeremy Grant, DeAndre Ayton, Robert Williams, the third. All these guys are back from injury. They drafted Donovan Clingan. They got what's the brother's name? Who's a really good defender? I forget his name. It doesn't ring my bell off the top. But he's a Tumani Kamara, really good defender, really good, smart, heady player. Right? They got guys like Jabari Walker, who was starting last season because of all the injuries, can't even sniff the floor. Right? This team is far better, even though they were a struggling team. Delano Banton's gotten better. Right? All these different things. Right? Anthony Simons, I didn't even mention, right? This team is healthy. They have another year under Chauncey Billups' leadership, more experience, more continuity. They're going to be better, right? All the way through. Teams that were dealing with massive injuries, right? The Clippers weren't sure whether Kawhi Leonard and Paul George were coming or going. Now they have their scheme. They're built around James Harden. Guys are filling into roles, right? These teams that were struggling are playing better, which means if you're figuring yourself out, playing teams that have already figured themselves out and fit into their roles at a high level with great coaching, you know what's going to happen? You know what's going to happen? They're going to beat you. They're going to beat you. So the Minnesota Timberwolves struggling right now isn't necessarily because, they're this terrible team and let's point the finger at everybody. It's just, hey, look at the context of the situation. If everyone else got better and you're still figuring yourself out, yeah, they're going to outplay you on many nights. Now, some of y'all might look to Karl Anthony Towns should have just stayed. No, he shouldn't have. Look, there were times where they could not play Karl Anthony Towns in the playoffs. You cannot have your first or second highest paid player be unplayable in the playoffs when it matters the most. His lack on defense, how much of the salary cap he took up, he did not give you enough for that salary. Considering you're playing in Minnesota, you're running up against the second apron, that was the situation. They had to move him off the books. And you know what? There's a bunch of other quality players that they could probably bring in and have really good depth and still have the scoring and the spacing and all these other things and get right back to winning next season if it doesn't happen for them this year. But I still think that they're going to turn this thing around because Julius Randle has the motivation because he wants to get paid this offseason. So he's going to figure it out. And I think that they want him to figure it out. Everybody on the team wants this team to figure it out so they can get at least to that second round, third round of the playoffs to find some success again. So I think it's going to happen for them. But it is going to look rough for the first half of the season because why? There was a late trade. They're still getting to know each other. They have no continuity. They have no chemistry. So it's going to look clunky, especially when everyone else in the West has figured themselves out. The last part of it is with this transition. Look, it is extremely hard to go from a journeyman player like Dante DiVincenzo was, right? He bounced around, he went from Milwaukee. He had injuries and he was out of the rotation on their championship run. Then he goes to the Golden State Warriors, right? And then he has a little bit of success there, learns from Steph and them. And then all of a sudden he goes to New York. He's biding his time. Quentin Grimes gets hurt. And all of a sudden DiVincenzo gets put in the starting lineup and boom, it happens. All of a sudden now Dante DiVincenzo is playing the game of his life. He's never played this good. We've never seen this version of him. And all of a sudden he is riding on an all-time high. And then just as quickly, he gets traded. And now he's in Minnesota. He is the third or fourth guard on this team with a young lottery chosen talent off the bench who is now looking to potentially take his place. And then he's going to be the fifth guard. That's a hell of a blow. That's a hell of a blow. Right? This is something that is not easy for any player to adjust to. I would love to hear an interview later on after this season and talk about just like what he was going, because I'm all into psychology and all that, right? But it's to say that I would love to hear about what was going on for him, that he now has to uproot his family from New York, the Big Apple, right? Getting all the fanfare and everybody loves him and he's wonderful. Had an amazing playoff run, right? He's the man, right? He's walking around like Walt Frazier out there. And then all of a sudden, he's in Minnesota as the third or fourth guard coming off the bench. That's crazy. That's crazy. And no time to sit and think about it and deal with it. So I think the Minnesota Timberwolves are really trying to figure themselves out in a changing landscape, right? Because now they got the Memphis Grizzlies back too, right? I didn't even mention them, right? Who are having a big bounce back year, right? So now the Western Conference has gotten significantly better within your own division, albeit, and you're still figuring yourself out. It's going to make for a rough start to the season. But I think they're going to figure it out. But as always, I want to know what you all think. If you agree, disagree, let me know in the comment section. Get at me because I'm going to get back to all your comments. And definitely hit the like button, subscribe, and the bell for notifications. And I'm going to get at y'all next time. Peace.